Ken Davis. He is a structural engineer and owner of KH Davis Engineering Consultants in Toronto. Ken, as Tony Grace was just reporting, this cargo ship struck the bridge early this morning, but we heard from officials there that this bridge was up to code, that there were no structural issues with it. So how does a bridge nearly 3 kilometers long come down then like a pile of dominoes?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's shocking to see the images of what happened. I was able to, excuse me, see a YouTube video that showed sort of a time lapse of the collapse. And of course, it appears that the ship was errant. It went off track. And I'm guessing that it just plowed right into the bridge pier, which of course provides support for the entire structure. If you look carefully at pictures of the bridge before the accident, you can see that the support that failed consisted of a very heavy concrete beam supported on what initially might look like 2 pillars, but in actual fact there's 4. And I'm thinking that if there was an impact on one of those 4 legs, that would have created an instability and caused that entire span to collapse. And the other reason that it might have brought the whole bridge down is that this isn't just a simple bridge that's supported at points. It's what's called a through truss bridge. It's a very large one, and the bridge itself relies on support from not just just individual supports, but even from adjacent spans. So it's a continuous structure. So if a part of it collapses, the rest of it can come down as well.
And I'm just going to ask crew if we can upstairs perhaps put up those live pictures, if we have them, of the structure now in the water. And I'm wondering, as we look at that, thank you, given the large debris field and the number of levels of investigation, including the NTSB, the FBI, is it going to be difficult, Ken, to reach a conclusion early as to exactly what happened? How difficult will it be to put together the evidence?
I don't think it's going to be difficult at all. I suspect, and I'm only speculating, of course I have no knowledge, but I suspect what's happened is there was some kind of a failure of some of the systems on the ship. It just happens that I have some knowledge of these ships, and there's, of course, the main engines that propel it forward. There's also thrusters that allow the ship to move side to side. And I'm wondering, especially in view of the fact that it sounds like there was a mayday or a warning ahead of time, I'm guessing that there was some sort of a failure of one of the systems on board the ship, which caused it to veer off course and collide with the bridge pier. And I think that probably the investigation is going to show that this wasn't because of a faulty bridge, it was because of a faulty ship.
Could you give us some insight then into why the ship lights may have been flickering right before the ship veered off coast? There have been reports of lights flickering just mere moments before the collision.
Well, no, who knows? I really couldn't speak to that.
But would that be a human that was flickering them? Would that be some sort of mechanical or technical breakdown?
Well, I guess it's possible that somebody was flashing lights to try to warn people, but I would think that would be fairly ineffective. But the fact that there was some sort of a distress call made, obviously that's a key aspect of what's going on here. So I suspect that the people operating the ship somehow knew that there was a problem, and they tried to warn authorities to get people off the bridge and stop the flow of traffic.
Ken, I'm going to squeeze in one last question with you, and that
yes,
is about the age of this bridge. We understand that it was built in 1977. Again, though, we heard that there were no structural issues. That was according to the governor this morning. Would a bridge today be built to a different code than it was in 1977?
Well, the current code would surely be different than it was in 1977. One aspect to this that occurred to me was that, back in 1977, the container ships were not as large as they are today. And I Googled, just out of my own curiosity this morning, it would appear that back in the 1970s, these container ships were far smaller than they are today. I think today they're probably more than double the size that they were in 1970 when this bridge was built. And of course, when we design structures like this, engineers, anticipate, what if something happens? For example, the Dome Stadium in Toronto, I believe, there's a lot of redundancy built into that roof in the event that an airplane were to crash into it. We don't want the whole roof to collapse, so it has to maintain a certain structure. So in the case of a bridge like this, you would expect that you'd want to design the supports to be able to carry a certain amount of impact. Now, of course, the size of impact that may have been anticipated back in 1970 may be very, very different than the size of impact that actually occurred in a view of the size of the ships that we have today.
Ken, hang tight. I just do want to ask you one other question, but I want to point out to our viewers that we are looking at the river and we see the U.S. Coast Guard helicopters overhead, again, as the search and rescue continues. So I lied, Ken. I got one more question, and that is, we heard from the governor that this is going to be a long-term rebuild of this bridge. This is a major commuter bridge. 35,000 vehicles go over this bridge every single day to the port. Based on your experience, how long would it take to rebuild a bridge of this size, almost 3 kilometers long?
Oh boy, it's going to be a long build.
Years?
It would be hard to imagine. It would be hard to imagine anything less than a year. I would say probably more like 2 years. It's going to be a long build.
Ken, thank you so much for being with us, part of our breaking news this morning. Ken Davis is a structural engineer and the owner of KH Davis Engineering Consultants in Toronto.